everybody. Welcome to the Seen and Heard podcast, a conversational series. I'm delighted today to welcome Amelia White. Amelia is an accredited BACP therapist with 14 years of experience. Specialising in working with ex-boarders, she offers individual therapy as well as her online course, Healing Beyond Boarding School, available in both mixed gender and women-only formats. In addition, she runs workshops, groups and trainings for therapists supporting former boarders. She has also written a chapter for Nick Duffell's new book, The Unmaking of Them, Clinical Reflections on Boarding School Syndrome, which is due out on the 16th of May this year. Having attended a co-ed boarding school from the age of 11, Amelia deeply understands the lasting impact of early separation and institutional upbringing. She is passionate about helping others explore how their childhood experiences have shaped their behaviours, relationships, and sense of self. Through her work, she supports clients in breaking unhelpful patterns, fostering self-acceptance, and moving towards a life of greater contentment and fulfilment. She lives in Brighton with her teenage daughters and is never too far from the sea. Welcome, Amelia.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah, it's great to connect today. We've had lots of fantastic conversations over the last year. We were originally connected together by Piers Cross, who's very busy at the moment with the film Boarding on Insanity, which is being released. We connected. We had some great chats. I found it extremely helpful to understand a lot more, not only about the therapeutic side of working with people who've been to boarding school, but also the female experience of boarding school as well. And that will be a key focus for us today. So thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
As always in these podcasts, I love to know a little bit more about the people I'm talking to. So before we kind of get into the work that you now do, etc., would you mind telling me a little bit about how things were for you when you were young, sort of family life and then school?
So a little bit of background preschool is that I grew up in Surrey. My mum, dad, my father died when I was 1 year old. So suddenly of a heart attack. So then I was brought up in a single parent family with just my mum and brother who's 3 years older than me. So it was quite a happy, stable childhood, actually. I went to the local school. I did have two grandmothers who kind of supported my mum. My mum worked full time all the time. And I think what led to boarding school was actually my brother. It was suggested to her that it would be the best thing for my brother to do because he didn't have a father. So let's send him off to a boys' boarding school so he can get good role models and learn how to be a man, kind of thing. We've since, as we've unpicked it later on, we've started to understand what led to that decision, being that my mum didn't go to boarding school, but my father did, and his father did, and then my mother remarried my stepfather who went to boarding school. My mother's mother went to boarding school. My mother's mother went to boarding school. So although my mum didn't, she actually grew up in this whole arena of ex-boarders. So the narrative was just, this is the best thing for him. There was no kind of questioning of it. So when he went off, it was, well, he's 3 years older than me. And I guess I got used to taking him to school. And then 1 year they introduced girls to the school, the year before I went. And I remember taking him there and suddenly seeing these girls walking around and thinking, oh, maybe that'll be fun. And so we then went into kind of the mission of getting myself into that school, which was a really heavy, it was like 3-day empty. You had to sleep at the school, and you had to, because we didn't have much income, and the particular school I went to, everyone generally goes who has under a certain amount of income. So I had to go up to the City of London and be presented to a panel of men and sell myself, so that one of them chose me and offered to pay the school fees for me to go to the school. So that was what led me into going to school at age, I was 11.
Yeah, thank you so much, Amelia, for sharing a bit of that. And great sadness to hear about your father. And I can resonate very deeply. Having lost a parent when I was young, losing mum. So it, there is that part of your sort of life missing, if you know, whether it's the masculinity or the femininity, and clearly they saw that for your brother that could be found maybe in an institution. But
very misguided, I would put it that way. And the other thing to bring in, that often this happens for children, but actually what they're not noticing is actually that child is grieving, and then they suddenly have to go through grief all over again by losing the next parent. So I see it with so many people that this happens. When a parent's died, they think the best thing for them.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then it sounds like so you went into the school that you went to very early in their experience of accepting girls into the school. And in some recent podcasts, spoken with women who went to single-sex girls' schools, those who went to co-ed, and really interested, as we'll come on to, in the difference of the sort of experience between a co-ed and a single-sex school. Both carry their different challenges in many ways. So off to school, and you mentioned as well being paraded in front of a group of men. I was watching the Boarding on Insanity film recently and seeing one of the contributors, Zoe, talking about being, feeling like a show pony, effectively, being sort of wheeled out and held on ceremony for everyone to sort of, for the men to clap and well done. That sounds like, how was that for you to go up there and see them?
At the time, it was fine. I did a project on Napoleon, which I presented to them. Which now, when you look back and think, why was I like 9-year-old girl? And that was the only thing that my mum knew. Not the only thing she knew about, but that was the topic that she liked. So she encouraged me to do this project on Napoleon to present. So I just remember feeling really proud that they'd chosen me. I'd won. But then what that set up, and what I guess I've looked at later on in life, is the power dynamic, the gratitude that I had to feel to this governor who paid the fees for me to go to the school. So he would come and visit like once a year, and I would meet for tea, and just had to be very kind of, grateful to him for all that he was doing. So I suppose with my own work on my own kind of relationship with men, or it's just, I see that as a very pivotal moment of that.
Thank you. The power side of things. And so tell me a little bit more. You're 11. You head off to school. They've only recently taken girls. Your brother's there. How was school for you?
Well, as you said, it was the first year that girls were there. So there were 800 boys, 200 girls. So it was very, male, imbalanced. Overall, I enjoyed school. I adapted quite easily. I made friends. So in lots of ways, I often feel like I don't fit what people expect me to be, because I'm not sitting here saying I was miserable all the time. However, what I understand as an adult looking back, I understand why I never cried, why I just turned around when my mum left and just got on with it. That my attachment was already broken. It wasn't there. So I look at that behaviour now with a different lens. And it's really as an adult that when I look back, I can see the impact that it's had on me, which is what's taken me into this work. Whereas the school itself, it's quite, we wore the uniform they wore in the 15th century. It was very, very traditional in very many ways. It was very stark. Slept in dormitories with 30 children, horsehair mattresses, iron beds. It was far from luxurious. And what's interesting about this school is, or how I felt, was the poorer you were, the higher your status, because most children were there from underprivileged backgrounds. I had a friend who had a double barrel surname, and she got so bullied as a result of it, because it meant that she was posh. But what this school does is, because you wear this 15th century uniform, any sense of identity is gone. So you all just become the same. And no one has any idea about each other's backgrounds. You don't wear any of your own clothes. I think to begin with, we were allowed to wear one different jumper on a Saturday night, but that was it. So your kind of outside life is just shut out. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing the experience, and we're really always keen to hear from people who had all different takes on it. For some, it was, years and years of abuse and neglect and hell. For others, it was sort of relatively benign, and sometimes it's only on reflection, as you say, that you start to see, oh, hang on a minute, what was that? My experience was, nowhere near as difficult as others. But like you, I went with broken attachments. With an avoidant attachment style, if you like, that came from home difficulties, and so for me, I had nothing. There was no home to be sick from, if you like. The homesickness, the bereavement, the abandonment bereavement part that Joyce Varian talks about. It was business as normal for me.
Actually, I will say something that what I learned later on in life was in my first year or the first term at school, I used to projectile vomit. So I'll say I never cried, I never shed a tear, but I used to have a bucket by the side of my bed. And I used to cough 3 times and then be sick. And it was a bit of a joke in the dormitory. It'd be like, oh, here she goes. And bizarrely, my mum, in the Christmas holiday, she took me to see a homeopath, which was kind of pretty out there for 1986. And he gave me these little pills, and it went. So I've been to a doctor, and they're like, it's asthma, it's various things. And then it went. And it was only through listening to Joyce Varian, who spoke about the symptoms that children can display, the physical symptoms, when they've suppressed their emotions, that made me go, oh, maybe that was it. Maybe I was homesick, but I wasn't able to express it because, as we all know, that's not something that's acceptable at boarding school. So I found another way physically to express it.
Thank you.
I think is sickness.
Sickness, actual sickness. There's something that needs to leave the body there. Thank you for sharing that. I think what I've heard in the conversation with Nikki Moxie and Linda Devereaux recently was about bedwetting and wetting knickers and boys wetting pants, etc. And I remember that being a very key sort of group of memories for me when I first went to boarding school at 7 was, there was always tears at bedtime from someone in the dormitory, but after a while they would be hit so many times or told to shut up so many times to stop crying. But the bedwetting didn't really stop, and a lot of the kids were wetting beds for many years. And of course it was always covered in, it was always shame. Oh, so and so's wet the bed again, it's very, very sad. But as you say, I don't remember crying myself. I think the faucet had already been turned off by that point. And it comes out, the body keeps the score, and it comes out in other ways, doesn't it? So,
well, it's just so known, the girl who did cry, she was so instantly picked on or so instantly kind of demeaned for it. So we just learn so quickly not to do that and not to feel those feelings.
Welcome. No. So as you progress then in school, Nick Duffel obviously talks about the strategic survival personality. What did you do to keep yourself safe?
I became a counsellor. So I say that because I literally, a year or so ago, someone who was on the year below. So at many schools, but as ours did, we were made a nursemaid to a child who comes on the year below. Which, if you even think of that term, is quite bizarre, which is basically, where someone's used to breastfeed a child which isn't their own. So we're called nursemaids. So I was given this new girl on the year below to look after. And a year or so ago, she sent me a letter that I sent her kind of in the summer term before she arrived. telling her how I was going to take care of her. If she had any problems, she can always turn to me and make sure she tells me everything that's going on. It was quite crazy, like reading this letter. And I could just see, right, this is what happened. I became everyone's shoulder to cry on. That was very much my stance. It was how I became really good friends with the boys. It was that kind of judgment of like, right, do you become, as a girl in a co-ed school, you're in a bit of a catch-22 situation. So do you become the one who is sexualized, who is kind of gets the boys' attention in that way? But then you've also got to be kind of like the boys, and you've got to be one of the boys, and you've got to kind of have those more kind of masculine traits. And it's just trying to win favour all the time. And that was the way that I won favour with both the girls and the boys, was kind of being everyone's friend, without a doubt, as well as I think I was amusing. I'm realising that later, actually. I'm like, was I? But yeah, a bit silly. And yeah, that strength, that resilience, that independence was there. I remember kind of just thinking, well, no, I don't need my mum. I do not need her. And that attachment was so strong. So that's the main thing, I think, the separation from family and taking so much pride in strength, independence, resilience, not needing anyone. That's what enabled me to be okay and to be fine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I can resonate so deeply with so much of that. I took the keep everyone in pocket, basically. So I was very chameleonic. I would just blend in with whichever group I was to sort of stay in favour, to stay safe. After some pretty brutal early bullying, I was like, I'm not having that again. So just have to keep in. But I do remember, around 12, 13, I was in a co-ed school, and the between the girls and the boys, it was a 50-50 mixed school. But it was very strange in that the girls were sort of unofficially expected to pair off with a boy. How was it for you?
There was that, but one of the biggest differences was the age difference. So it was very much like in the first few years, people kind of went out with each other, like the 11-year-olds and things like that. So there was that expectation. And I remember, being asked out, and we used to walk onto the field. And I remember once being at this cricket pavilion, and there were like two other couples, we're talking 11-year-olds. And we then had the moment where we're supposed to sit and we're supposed to kiss and not really knowing what we're supposed to do. So there was that expectation, that this is what you're supposed to do. And then the house dances and the expectation that, you're supposed to do these things. And no pastoral care at all. Those kind of spin the bottles and children ending up in the studies at the end. And some difficult stuff that happened. For girls, friends of mine in those situations. But there was very much the 14-year-olds be going out with the 18-year-olds. I was really rare because my brother was 3 years older. And because I kind of knew the boys in his year in his house, they all got together with the girls on my year in my house. And that was quite a strange thing for me, because there was part of me that was like, but what about me? Why don't you want to be with me? And it was like, oh yeah, but you're the little sister. But yet those friends of mine now will just say, I wasn't ready for that. I wasn't ready to have sex. I wasn't ready, actually, at that stage to do that. So there was some pressure.
Thank you for sharing that experience. I think that was very much with this expectation that came in my experiences. You'd be sort of pushed into a music practice room with the girl who sort of you've been paired off with effectively, and I just still remember just standing there looking at two scared kids looking at each other going, how do we get out of this, because neither of us want to be here, and we sort of bumbled our way through an excuse and then basically lied to everyone and said, oh yeah, all that sort of stuff. But I just remember that's two scared kids looking at each other kind of not knowing why they were there, and really, really heartbreaking.
I was just that's the big thing that comes up a lot. It's kind of the bravado, the kind of what then gets spoken about back in the dormitory.
Yeah.
As you say, that it may not even be true.
Yes.
But it's like, I've got to say that this is what we did.
Mm.
And a lot of the women that I work with carry huge amount of humiliation and shame about whatever they got up to being spread around the dormitory.
Yeah, yeah. I really saw that in all of my schools. They were from 10 onwards were all co-ed, and typically, you know, the boys' side of things was physical, and between the girls and between the boys and the girls, it was psychological. It was shame. It was a lot of name calling, you know, slut and slag and all this sort of language. Really, really, I mean, just everyday language. It was really, really toxic. And I've been connecting with some old friends from one of my schools recently, and they were talking about the shame they carried for years of using language like that when they came to have relationships, adult relationships, or had daughters, and they just thought, "Oh my God, you know, this is not okay. It's not remotely okay." Yeah.
And what I'm really reminded of, just like talking about this, is that for us, and it may be different in different schools, but the girls never spoke about the sexual acts they got up to. There wasn't this, oh, I'm going to brag about, oh, I've just done this with so-and-so. That didn't happen. That was actually kept private, whereas the impression I've got with the boys, that it was more of a status thing to be spoken about. And that's often where the girls carry so much shame about, I've heard people being said, you know, it was shouted out the dormitory window, you slag, you slut, all this kind of stuff. Really difficult.
Yeah.
And again, they're just trying to find their way, and they're just generally trying to feel loved.
Yeah. And this is it, isn't it? I think they're trying to have some connection with someone on a, you know, meaningful level, whether it's, you know, same sex, different sex, friend, or kind of, you know, blossoming sort of young romance or first relationships or whatever it is. Well, it was a drive for connection to seek something out. But I can certainly say, having been on the, you know, the boys' side of things, the bragging, the bravado, and the talking about things that I would say 75% of the time didn't even happen. They were just cooked up to sort of, you know, puff up the chest, and so and so's, you know, he's very experienced and he did this and he did that, and seeing it, you know, I've got 13-year-old daughters, so when I have these conversations about you know, the female boarding experience, I can't get out of what my girls bring home every night, as far as stuff from their day school, the stuff that's going on with their friends, the changes in their lives, their bodies, everything. And I just think the idea of them being in an institution to go through that with everything that goes with it, it breaks my heart.
Yeah. And that there's no one there to support them, to advise them, to tell them that they're okay.
Thank you, Amelia. So with that, the experience you went through, what happened afterwards? How did you sort of come out into the world and start to make your way? You know, and what did your early years sort of leave you with as you became an adult?
Well, I actually left the school I was at after my GCSEs, which, again, I've had lots of therapy about to understand, because what actually happened was I was taken aside and told that they thought I might not get the 5 GCSEs that I needed in order to stay on for A-levels, which totally shocked me because it had come out of nowhere, as far as I was concerned. So I started to look for sixth form colleges. So I got all my GCSEs, all A's and B's, but I decided to not go back. I felt so deeply wounded and rejected by the school that I felt like I didn't belong. I wasn't good enough to be at the school, and therefore kind of left my tail between my legs. Didn't actually tell them. I just didn't go back in September. So that has shaped me hugely, because I was then in a situation where I didn't know where to go, because I didn't really feel I could go back to my mum's house. I couldn't, the school that had become my attachment figure, really, I couldn't be there either. So I did go back to my mum, and I remember writing her a letter saying, I promise you I won't get in the way, I'll be really quiet. And I just kind of lived there for 2 years and went to sixth form college. But it was then that I started developing an eating disorder. And again, in hindsight, I understood that that was my way of understanding my emotions and the pain that I was feeling at that time. And when I first had counselling for it in my early 20s, I remember she would ask me about those 2 years, and I couldn't really recall that much of it. So I just got on with it. And I did a bit of a kind of rebel thing in that I decided that what I was going to do is I was going to lose loads of weight, and then I was going to go back the last day of term and say, look at me, look how successful and beautiful I am. So I did that 2 years later, and I got back into this uniform, and I did the leaving service with everyone else in my year, and left in that way. So that's a different take on the whole experience. So the work that I've done on myself is also understanding with regards to abandonment. It then felt like an extra abandonment because I felt like I was abandoned by the school when that had then become my home and my attachment, but dug down into kind of low self-esteem of actually I'm just not good enough, they don't want me to be here. So that had a big impact on me. So then after that, I went off. I basically just went into the world of travelling, is what I did. I spent a year, a gap year, doing the normal kind of thing. And then I went to University of Liverpool and did politics for 3 years. And then I went into the world of travel. Basically, all I wanted to do was, I knew that when I was not in this country, I felt happy. But as soon as I came back here, I felt all the pressure and all the stress and not feeling good enough. And I've got to conform and I've got to have a certain career. And that I struggled with a lot in my 20s, never feeling like whatever I was choosing to do was good enough because of my education. And so after I'd done all the travel, I worked for travel companies in London, but I carried so much shame about it. Those questions, what do you do? Because I knew that I could have been a teacher and that would have given me a green tick, even though I might have earned less money, but that there's certain careers that deemed acceptable. So my 20s were just interspersed with travelling and kind of working in London, really. And then I had my first daughter when I was 26, 27, so quite young in many ways. But I now look at it as it was like, phew, right, I can get off this like ladder of not feeling good enough and not knowing what to do career-wise. It can give me a bit of breathing space.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, thanks for sharing some of that journey. I'm really hearing, getting out the country was, to escape sort of, you can kind of almost be someone different, can't you? When you're somewhere else, you can be whoever you want to be, and that nobody knows you there, and you can help shed some of that. So the travel bug, I think a lot of exporters do. We sort of propagate the globe all over the place a lot of the time. Obviously, we were designed that way. The kind of emotionally cauterized soldiers of empire sent off to hill forts in India and everything else to kind of do the empire's bidding for hundreds of years. So it makes sense that traveling and the sort of itchy feet, restless side of things.
Disconnect. It's the feeling of otherness that so many exporters have, because it's that question of like, where are you from? And you can't say, oh, I'm from an institution. I say, I'm from this place with like a ring fence in Sussex. And it's like, that's not really home, is it? So there's always this feeling of like, well, I don't fit in. I don't really fit here. So for a lot of people, at least when they're living in China, it's obvious that they don't fit. It's obvious that they're an outsider. Whereas the extra pressure of being, if you're born and school in England, and then you're in England, you don't feel like you fit. Everyone sees you as fitting. And people find it easier to be that outsider abroad than they do within their own country.
Yeah, thank you for that insight. Yeah. With then your daughter, just love to hear a little bit about parenting as an exporter, parenting obviously with someone who had, who lost your dad young, single parent family, away at 11, boarding school. How did you parent? How did you find it?
Do I find it? I guess because it's still very much going. So it was at that age. It was the age of 11. So everything was kind of all okay up to that point, and then it was just I've got no idea, just no blueprint on how to do this. And so I'd be checking in with my husband all the time, like, is it okay for them to? Homework was a massive thing, because they were all at the local state school and there was very little homework given. And it'd be like, is that okay? Is it not okay? Should I be making her sit down and do 2 hours prep every night? Is it okay to not do that? So just not knowing what was right and what was wrong. I knew that it wasn't right, the boarding school system and structure, but yet I had no experience of whether this would be okay. And they all managed to do really well in their GCSEs with doing very little homework, as we said, so it doesn't always pan out in that kind of rigidity. But that just being one thing with school, but the biggest lesson for me, or the learning that we've done together, is about learning what it means to be a woman. And that, I feel I still carry some shame for my eldest daughter, because I had to learn from her. So when she started becoming a teenager, I was really aware of shaming her, as she wanted to kind of try on makeup and be dressing up and wearing all these clothes. There was that misogynistic part of me, which I learned from school, to shame girls, like we were talking about earlier, that's slut shaming, that kind of thing. I was one time, I think, and she still brings it up, where she said something like, ew, or something. And I was just like, what are you doing? Like, that's so like pathetic and feminine and just making noises. Because, the misogyny was so huge in me that it was like, no, you've got to be a certain way to be a woman. And so they have taught me another way of being a woman, which I'm incredibly grateful for them. And now my youngest, like the eldest, will be like, I'm like, you're really okay with her wearing makeup at school and doing all these things. Whereas the eldest, I'd be like, what have you got on your face? So yeah, they've taught me a lot in that way. And just being in a family, that's, to me, is the most important thing. It's been really bloody hard. It's really hard at times. I think as an ex-boarder, I think something that I see a lot of people doing, and myself, is that we can often compensate for the lack of parenting that we have had. So in my case, I wanted to make sure they were all okay all the time. And because of what I do for a job, it's like, you really can talk to me, you really can tell me your problems, you really can, la 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 la. And my middle daughter has been absolutely brilliant, because at one point she was just like, no, I don't want to. I will talk to my friends about my stuff. I don't want to talk to you. And it was really painful. It was like this rejection. And then it's like, that's healthy. That's what teenagers should be doing. This sense of kind of, just really being aware with regards to boundaries. Boundaries is a difficult thing, I think, for parents, again, because they want to make sure their children don't ever feel the way that they felt, where there wasn't anyone to listen to them or pick them up or do things. So every day it's a new lesson. It's a new lesson being with them.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I really feel that in my heart when you said being overcompensating. I just went straight. I have like this because with my girls I'm the same. Sure, you don't want to talk about it, and it's good to talk and do that. And I'm thinking, this is all the things. I'm basically trying to be the parent that I never had. But if your kids are securely attached because they've grown up in a home and they're loved, you're not going to get it right all the time, but you were there, etc. They've got that inner true confidence, not the sort of bravado confidence, the full self confidence, but they've actually got the real stuff that says, no, you're all right. I'll let you know when I need you. It's like, okay.
If they're 13, you're going to start to hit this big time, which is where they're just going to reject you.
Oh, God.
That's really hard. But actually, it's a sign that you're doing a really good job. They're
goodness.
supposed to protect you and rebel against you so
Yeah.
that they can make relationships with other men or whoever they choose to do that with.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to hold your,
All your
sense of
stuff.
self. Yeah.
Thank you. You mentioned in there just that they supported you in the kind of journey of being a woman and finding out what that really means for you. We don't always hear a lot about the female experience of boarding school, or the female experience of healing. From the effects, if you like. There tends to be quite a lot of time around the boys' experience and around the abuse side of things, which is understandable. It's absolutely abhorrent and far too common, sadly. So in your work and your personal journey, you've met a lot of female ex-boarders. What have you seen across that, and why do you think that it's not as spoken about?
Because boys are conditioned to have more of a sense of entitlement and use their voice much more than women are. From a very young age, we're socialized to be good, to please others, to not speak up. It's quite interesting, actually. I just noticed when you just asked me that, I could feel my heart going a bit and starting to think, oh, actually, it's touching a nerve. Because it's really, really hard for women to speak up. Something that gets me angry is actually the assumption that girls don't experience physical violence and abuse, because they do. But if we look at the law courts, we look at the systems, we look at actually what happens if a girl talks about rape, then often the experience is turned on to her. What was she wearing? What did she do? How does she encourage it? The belittling and shaming that happens for girls prevents them from speaking up. And so this goes on within the boarding schools themselves. So what I see a huge difference is that girls are often described as being in relationship with male teachers. There's a sense that girls have more emotional maturity, so therefore it's more consensual. And that happened. Numerous examples I have from my own school of girls who were abused by teachers, but yet everyone just talks about them being in relationships with them. So therefore the girls take on that narrative themselves that actually they are to blame, that this is what's happened. So that's one of the reasons why they don't speak up. Also, the romanticising of fiction that happens, the Nunnery Tales, the Twins of St Clair's, the Happy Human Centrillion's tales. It's not spoken about. So even like I was thinking about this earlier, like even within literature, like some of the films that depict male boarding schools, they will depict the violence, they will show some of the abuse, even like Dead Poets Society, where a boy kills himself. There's nothing about that with girls. So again, it's just not really spoken about and known. So having spaces where people can share and talk about this stuff is so important. And we've seen that. I remember us saying, it was really interesting, wasn't it, in the conference, that now it's becoming more and more women that are coming out and sharing their stories. I currently have a women's group, and I can't tell you how powerful it is, but the hardest thing for them is being in a group of women, because it's just triggering all the shame and all the brutality that they experience within a group of women in that context. The kind of being sent to Coventry, the kind of, that has such a lasting impact, but it goes deep into their own self-worth. So they don't feel like they have anything to talk about because it's their fault, that actually this is done to them for a reason. Someone had recently, I heard about someone their bed was removed from the dormitory, in this sense of to make out that they don't even exist. And we just think, what that does to a psyche of a girl in those places. So yeah.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think certainly it's seen and heard our women's group sharing circle is the most oversubscribed. 60% of all of our service users are women, and it's been great to provide some spaces. Now I know that you in your work you provide you've got your courses, your workshops. Tell us a little bit about those.
So I began doing a mixed gender group, which I've run for quite a few years now, and it's kind of morphed along the way. I think when I first started, it was like an 8-week course, and it's now a 6-month kind of program. And part of the reason for that is we get so far. So it began just more like an awareness course, just citing the things that I thought were most important for people to build their awareness. And then we get to the end and people go, oh, what now? What do I do with it now? Which is why I've extended it. And it lasts for 6 months. And then people actually have an option to stay within the community as such, to continue afterwards, because that is so essential for this. And it's been fascinating along the way, because I have people from all different parts of the world, and all different ages. And that's really wonderful to bring together. So there'll be a 75-year-old woman and a 28-year-old man, and they're talking and they're sharing their experiences, which again is what doesn't happen at boarding school. You're isolated. You haven't got community around you. You haven't got your grandmother there to talk to and to have these conversations. So that's what's really, really special about it, the connections in that way. So they go through a kind of, I'm doing that, like there are 12 areas that I've seen as being really fundamental to, helping them to start to heal from the impact. So it's quite, someone once said, this isn't just a course about boarding school, it's a course about re-examining yourself, because there is the impact of looking at your parents and your relationships before you went to school and everything that's led to you to this place. Fundamentally, a huge thing is about self-esteem and self-worth. And that's what I think comes and is improved on by being part of a group. That's very different from one-on-one therapy. That actually, when they're, and you see and that's what's so beautiful about it, because when people come, they are terrified. It's like, why would I want to put myself back in a group situation? But learning to trust other people again and show yourself and be vulnerable and show compassion and care to one another is actually what the healing is. And that's the important part, really important part of it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the group side of things is so powerful that humans have healed each other in groups for, hundreds of thousands of years. And you can do fantastic work one-to-one. But I do think group work is a really helpful multiplying effect, to one-to-one. And then if you can go into retreat setting or workshop setting, particularly if there's something that uses nature or is over a couple of days, then again, you get another multiplier. And I think on my healing journey, I've seen one-to-one, regular group stuff and retreats and workshops as a really nice sort of package that's surrounded by all the other goods, diet, nature, meditation, etc. But because the wound is a relational wound,
exactly.
Healing in relationship with an individual, with a partner, with friends, family, but also with others who've had a similar experience, very powerful.
And that's what so many boarders do. They'll often turn up or like to individual sessions, and they've got all the books, and they've got all the notes in the margins, and everything's been highlighted and everything's intellectualized. And it's like, well, what now? How do I? And it's actually going, this is the bit that really helps. So no, in an ideal world, I wouldn't be doing it online, but it's a way to access people. And I have people in Australia going, there's no one that does this. How do we? And that's what's so wonderful, because there can be people in Australia and America, Canada, and they're all going, oh, we've actually all got something in common. And that's what gets severed with boarding school. So to actually rebuild community, even in this strange online space that we have, it's powerful.
It is. Yeah, there's such a place for online work. There's a place for in-person work. There's a place for one-to-one. I think that, having a broad spectrum and also, healing modalities, whether it's psychotherapy or counselling or, acupuncture or, whatever it is, there's sort of trying lots of things. I'd always really encourage. You've recently written a chapter for Nick Duffel's book about the impact of co-ed schools on girls. What took you into that, and how was the process for you?
Um, I guess it touches on some of the stuff that we've been talking about. And it's because of my work with women and I guess my own personal experience of growing up in a co-ed boarding school. And something that gets me angry is the narrative these days that, all boarding schools are fine now because they're co-ed. This kind of, we don't need to look at it because it's not like it was in the old days when it was single sex. And we see that there's only, I think, going to be 3 like single sex all boys schools left soon because they've all become co-ed. So it's as if you can go, it's all right now, it's all okay. And my experience and what I have heard so many women share is that it's really not okay. And it touches a lot on what we were talking about earlier in that difference between the girls and the boys as a pastoral care and the amount of unfortunate experiences that girls have of abuse within these institutions, whether that's by teachers or whether it's by the boys. And, we're understanding that they're all put in this, pot and trying to survive in the best ways they can. But so many girls have experiences which are not okay, and because there's no one looking after them or looking over them. So there was a lot of that behind it, really. So what I did is I actually devised a questionnaire and sent it out, and I had about 40 respondents who came back. And it wasn't just centred on the kind of sexual assault area. That's just what came through, which kind of surprised me actually. Although I knew, it was still quite hard to hear about it. But just all the impacts. A lot to do with mothers. That's one of the biggest things, I'd say, for women, co-ed, single sex. But there wasn't one respondent who spoke about her relationship with her mother not being affected in a really difficult way. So it was really interesting kind of hearing back. And women, again, wanting the space to tell their story, to actually really answer these questionnaires. And I could see how people just wanted to keep writing in order to kind of get it out there. But it's really giving a voice to those girls, women who were at co-ed schools, who now the narrative is like, it wasn't as bad for you because it was co-ed. And it's recognising that actually in a co-ed school, you're in a all-girls boarding house. So you've got the same issues that go on within an all-girls boarding house. And then you've got that added dimension of having to be attracted to the boys and all that comes with it. And the confusion that has women, and especially misogyny. That's the thing that I really see really profoundly with girls who've gone to co-ed boarding schools, because they've often joined the schools which are set up for men, all about boys, and they just have to go along with that. So it really accuses a real conflict in their identity when they come out, not knowing what to do. Do I just have to use sex in order to get attention? So yeah, it felt really important to give a voice to people.
So, amazing. Thank you so much for that, sharing that, and then for writing the chapter. I think it's going to be a very, very powerful book. And along with, you've got Kathy Wield's book that's just come out, Unshackled Mind, about her experience of school. Vicky Moxie and Linda Devereaux's book, due soon, which is around boarding stories and challenges for women and third culture kids. It certainly feels like there's a lot more. There's a lot more opportunities to hear the stories now and to start to change that narrative, but needs to be very actively pushed, because otherwise it will sort of slide back to the way it had been for too long.
Actually, after the premiere of Piers's film, I was talking to a male. Anyway, and he said, I actually think that it's going to be the women who push this forward now. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. Point on it, because you can see that drive that's coming. And so, having women behind this seems to be pushing it forward in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. If there isn't voices of both genders, if there isn't voices from people who came from overseas, as well as nationals, if there aren't voices from the whole experience, it loses its power. We'll be running our series to continue to share the female perspective, women's perspective of boarding, and we've got plenty more episodes lined up. We're coming to the end of our time together, sadly, today. Always goes so fast. Is there anything you wanted to leave people with? Is there anything you wanted to touch on before we finish today, Amelia?
I think one of the things that I find one of the most important things for people to recognise with regards to their experience at boarding school is it's not about whether you were happy when you were at school. It will still have affected the way that you are in relationships when you're older, or how you take care of yourself, or you kind of how you feel about work, or various things that people on the other side as such will always be like, yeah, but I had a great time. I was really happy. I was really, I did really well at sport, and I did. And it's like, yeah, that's great. And I'm really glad that, you didn't have any of the difficulties of bullying and abuse and stuff. However, that still means that there's so many kind of reasons why you may find difficulties later on in life. And it's that narrative that I find really difficult. And it was, for me, it was when my own marriage ended, it was then going, okay, right, I'm now starting to understand why I am this way in relationship, and was able to backtrack and start to look at this stuff. And it was just so helpful to give a narrative and an understanding to that. But yeah, I could have been one of those people, and I am, who said, yeah, I made friends. Yeah, it was okay. However, it has had an impact on how I am in life, and how hard it is to manage to do everything all on your own all the time, and ask for help. And I have to constantly challenge myself on it all the time. So kind of don't just dismiss your experience because you did really well at sport. It will have shaped you in some ways. And most importantly, if you dismiss it, it will impact those around you. And that's why this work is so important, because the transgenerational impact on others, on your own children, if you haven't looked at this stuff, that they bear the consequences of it.
Thank you, Amelia. Yeah, thank you so much. Very, very important. The healing journey doesn't just affect the person, but I can testify to that, to my family, my girls, etc. The world around me. So the film that you referenced looks at the wounded leaders in society. So it's big stuff. When people heal, the world heals. And inviting people who, even if they really felt they had a good time, it was a great privilege, and they had all the benefits, etc. Just to look at the areas of your life that are difficult, where there are beliefs that aren't serving you anymore, and just start to think, okay, well, maybe where do those come from? And then they can explore in groups, one-to-one, we've talked about. Yeah. But Amelia, it's been wonderful to spend some time together today. I'll make sure that the links to your work, your website, your workshops, etc., are in the show notes. And obviously, with the book coming out soon, we'll be running a competition to win advanced copies and signed copies, and go to the book launch and things like that on Seen and Heard. But any final words before we finish today?
No, it's been really lovely, Chris. It's really easy, actually. I was thinking, what's he going to ask? What's going to come up? But no, once I get started, I can just seem to flow. So no, it's been good. It's been lovely. Perfect. Thank you.
Well, huge thanks.
Using my voice, I guess that's what this is about.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, for your work in this area, and your work to support others, and for writing this chapter in the book. So we'll say goodbye for now, Amelia White. I've been Chris Braitch. This is the Seen and Heard podcast. Huge thanks for listening, watching, and please do stay tuned for more episodes. But take care for today. Cheers. Bye.